numbers of people who actually come to that class to the number of people who come to a level 1 class are significantly different because people don't want to put in the time. And so I wasn't, saying like yoga is a business and that's the end of the story. I'm saying that it's, some people are talking about why didn't they make enough money as a yoga teacher, arguing this point, but at the same time saying I want to keep the authenticity of it. I think there is a way to do it. I just think that both sides need to be compared. A studio cannot stay open no matter how good the teacher is if they don't have people coming into the studio and paying. It's just like it's not going to happen. So, yeah, that's all.
I find it so interesting that the problem of studio economy is an ever-present context for the discussion. What we need to do to make it work. So just one of my personal hobby horses is whether or not, for this reason, the studio structure in general might be, a 35-year social experiment that will gradually elide as more and more teachers evolve into home practice sort of situations. Because really, what we say when we quote our business challenges is that we say the overhead that we are paying is going to be making some of our decisions for us, right?
No, I don't. I disagree. I think that I don't think that it has to be that way. Mm-hmm. I think that a teacher can be authentic and run a good studio and that kind of thing. It's just that what I have heard in the discussion prior to this was teachers talking about standardized pay. When you're talking about standardized pay, you are talking about yoga as a business. I'm sorry. That's what that is, right? You're asking to be paid as a professional, as a job. You're not talking about yoga in the spiritual way. And so when I hear people talking about, I want standardized pay as a yoga teacher and I don't make enough money as a yoga teacher, they're talking about their job as a yoga teacher. They're not talking about what they're teaching, But I think that it's okay. I think that it can work together. I don't think that it's going to work for everyone, but I think that for some people it is going to work, And, I don't think that making yoga private is necessarily a way to go either, because then it's like, who can pay for a private?
Oh, I'm talking about 4 or 5 people at a time in the living room.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
That's what I'm talking about.
Okay.
Monica.
I just thought of a really sweet little anecdote about teacher training. Some years ago, I met a previous student of mine on the street, and she was saying, I'm thinking about your teacher training program, and I said rather apologetically, well, it's 2 years long. She said, no problem. I've just finished a 4-year shamanic training, and the longer the program, the more you realize what you don't know. The shorter the program, the more you think you know everything, because that's a program, right?
I think Jessica brought up the 30-day being bombarded, and this, I think this is a very interesting point. Is that the compression.
I mean, she said, and I just breathed a sigh of relief and dropped my shoulders, and now don't ever apologize for that ever again. But the point about the short program being enough is that program is offered, right? That program is out there, it's offered, so why wouldn't it be enough?
I was in Quebec just a couple of weeks ago with a group of formateurs. There's a Centre de Transmission de Yoga who work in the same tradition I do, and their teacher training programs are 3 years. Used to be 4 years, and they've reduced them to 3. These come from Desica through Claude Maréchal, who's a Belgian, very experienced, 30 years, 25 years coming to Quebec. But those are the minimum standards. And once you've done the formation, so the first a teacher training of 3 or 4 years, then there are post-formation. And Claude, who's been coming to Quebec for years, he comes back every year, and all, the teachers, some of them still go to him, some of them go to someone else, but there's this sense of continuity, and my own experience is that, going back to seminars, to my teacher, the longer the better, and you continue to learn, and so 200, 500 hours, it's just the beginning.
Okay, so now we're negotiating between the real and the ideal again.
Okay, so where do I start? Hi, I'm Lauren again. Okay, so with all due respect regarding, being a yoga teacher and trying to make a living at it and like pay standards, I've been teaching, I guess now going on my 8th year. That's not a long time really, it's not a long time, but I have my moments where I'm like, I'm doing this because I love this. I'm not doing this because I plan on getting rich in any way. But then I still have like moments where I'm like, maybe I should just throw in the towel. I'm sure every yoga teacher has had that moment. Maybe I should just do a totally different job. This is really hard. That being said, if the community could support the teachers, then in 20 years from now, there'll be more teachers with 20 years experience and not just with charisma. And that's where I look to my yoga community to tell me how I can be a better yoga teacher and where I would fit in the style of teaching that I have to present. And I want that to be a conversation. I don't expect any certain type of pay, but I also don't expect certain studio owners to use the yoga philosophy against me and why I should accept a lower rate of pay when I'm just trying to pay my rent and also pay for continuing my education, which is so important to me. So these, big shots come into town and they charge so much money for their yoga teacher training programs, and I just want to learn more. But don't they know that we don't make that much? So it's this like really horrible cycle. So then we don't make that much, and we say, forget it, I'm going to open my own studio then. And then we say, all right, I'm going to do my own teacher training then. And it's this horrible cycle. And so, like, despite the fact that I've completed, this 2-year teacher training program, I've decided to continue to study with my teachers, and I don't foresee that to ever stop. Like, I've decided, like, I'm going to keep studying with my teachers. I'm not done learning from them, and that's my decision, right? But I think that should be supported, and people should continue to learn from their teachers and not just think that they know everything after 30 days, hopefully.
Do we have this on the board that there would be? Do we have this on the board that there would be continued education credits necessary to maintain standards? I don't think that's come up yet. And I know this exists in lots of professions, but this isn't part of Yoga Alliance, or does anyone know if it's part of yoga at all? It's part. Okay, yeah. It is part of Yoga Alliance. Okay, so thank you.
Well,
I thought I read it somewhere.
I actually find it,
At least we have it up there.
it seems kind of strange even to have to flag that, right? I mean, just sort of when you talk about the big shots that come into town and charge so much for their teacher trainings, I don't know about my teacher training. I mean, it's so far back in the midst of time, well, not that far, but far enough that, it was spread out over a long period of time. I mean, the number of hours was really immaterial because it was a 2-year program, right, originally at the Dog. And it was never, that had hiccups because it was a very new program as it went along, but there wasn't a sense of you had to get these many hours in a certain amount of time. It was this established relationship. And I can remember everybody wanting to go run off and study at whichever ashram with whichever name brand teacher. And, my teacher's just there, right? And you can go in every day and you keep working with him, and it's been a relationship I've had now 12 plus years, right? I mean, I don't understand why even sort of thinking about having continuing education. It's constant continuing education if you still work with your teacher, and it doesn't have to be thousands and thousands of dollars. I mean, in fact, it's actually a cheaper way of getting a teacher training is just go take the Mysore with a good teacher, or go take a self-practice with a good teacher over a long period of time. You develop a relationship with them, and that's how it used to be, right? I mean, it used to be you would work with your teacher, and then at one point they would decide, okay, you go teach this class, And I think part of what's happened again is that The one question that I have that sits at the root of this is when yoga stopped being something that you had to go find your teacher and became something that we proselytized, is when we got into this trouble. I mean, I sometimes think like, it was never made easy to go find a teacher and study with them in the thousands and thousands of years that yoga existed in the first place. And then all of a sudden now everybody's grabbing your attention with advertising, new stuff coming through the email. Like, I don't look at stuff on the web. It just depresses me when I look at any of like the things that I see. No, really, I go, I should know what's out there. Maybe I'll take a look at it. And then I'm like, yeah, it's just, I got to go practice, do my pranayama to get over this, right? It's one of those things where I just, and I mean, I'll be straight up about my choice. I did decide to do something else. I am deciding to do something else, and I don't think it necessarily stops being a teacher. I mean, again, Yogi Krishnan's first teacher was the grammar teacher in his local school, and I think sometimes that ties in with our whole idea of being professional in so many other things that weren't necessarily professional 100 years ago. Chekhov was a doctor. So like, the master of the short story had another profession entirely and did something on the side, and it doesn't take away any of the quality of what it was that they did, and I just think that that's, the last thing I'd add is that, Yogi Krishna, when he looked at us when he walked in for our first class too, and he goes, well, let's be clear about this. You're going to be teachers of asana. Everybody's like, okay, and the thing is that because everybody in that room had sort of been seeking and looking for it and like reading and trying to find people, when a teacher then said that, it had a certain amount of weight. But when people have been advertised to and it's a product that they're buying and they're looking at it as a wedge to do something else one way or the other, then they're going to come in with a completely different attitude towards what it is that they're getting, right? And I think that's sometimes where it changed. It's like, and because it's about making money again, then you have to advertise, you have to proselytize, you have to put bums in the seats. And I can't see the way around the conundrum. I mean, most of my teaching has been private classes anyway. It's people that I've come across and that I work with in small groups and things like you said. Like, a lot of my classes have been 5 or 6 people in a living room or in a gallery. I only teach about 3 or 4 studio classes a week, so.
Just to speak to what you were saying, I like the option that we have in the modern age to be able to go around and study with a lot of different teachers and study a lot of different programs. But one of the things I've seen over the years that's disturbing is that students will come for a teacher training and then never come back to that studio again. Sometimes they've shopped around and they found this program that they're going to do and they don't stay there and study. What if we introduced a kind of an idea where, I'm not sure what the word is, but you'd be on some sort of parole after graduating where you would...
Academic probation?
Yeah, like, what would be the word? Like, you would be graduated and teaching.
Probationary.
A probationary period, yeah. But you'd have to keep studying. Or if you didn't want to study with that particular studio or school or lineage, that you would have to in some way show that you were doing the credits and that we could have different probationary periods where at least we would know people were continuing to study afterwards.
Well, I've had, 2 teacher trainings I've done. We ran how many people through in those 2 years? Probably about 20. About 20-something, right? Maybe about 20-something. I had 1 person asked to assist classes with me afterwards. Out of those 22 people, 1 person. And after each class, they said, I can see her, she's writing notes all the time, right? Feeling like, it's the way I learned was apprenticing in a classroom. Like, you have to walk around, you see hundreds, thousands of bodies. People who come in with completely different attitudes. They're people you just leave them alone. Like, after a while, you begin to realize, I can't go in on their life